Hello and welcome. If this is your first time with us, thank you so much for stopping by. You are listening to Choose to Endure, the show dedicated to the non-elite runners, where we share stories, interviews, gear, and training tips specific to the tail-end heroes of the ultra universe. My name's Richard Gleave. I have been running ultras now since 2017. I have taken on and finished numerous ultra distances all the way up through 220 miles, and I am unashamedly a member of the back of the pack, just like many of you out there. Now, today I am thrilled to introduce you to a really quite extraordinary guest, Mr. David Solomon. David's story is one of resilience, creativity, and passion. Not only is he an accomplished ultra runner, but he is also a really talented photographer, capturing stunning landscapes under his name and moniker, Beloved Peace Photography. What makes David's journey even more remarkable is that he's done all this while living with fascioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, FSHD, moving forwards, which is a progressive muscle disorder that presents some unique physical challenges. Despite this, David has refused to let those challenges define his limits. And in this episode, we're going to hear about his very recent experience finishing the Swammie Shuffle 200. We'll explore his creative journey behind the camera lens and learn how he continues to push himself physically and mentally while living with FSHD. So, whether you're here for the inspiration, the ultra running insights, or just to hear a really compelling story, I think you're in for a treat. Let's dive in.
Discover raw, inspiring stories from runners who've been right where you are. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with your host.
He's English, not Australian.
Richard Gleave.
David, welcome to the show. Really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you today. I think you've had such an incredible journey. I really think listeners are going to find your story inspiring and relatable. To get things kicked off, can you share a bit about your background and really what first drew you to ultra running and also photography? Where does that come into play?
Well, my earliest recollection of running was when I was a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old. There was this guy that lived across the street that was older than me, and he would do the 1 mile loop around the neighborhood that we lived in. And I expressed interest to go with him, but I guess he didn't think I would be able to do the distance. And but I did do the distance. I seem to recall more than once, and he was surprised that I was able to stick with him and do the distance. And so distance running has just sort of always been just a part of who I am. I ran track in the 9th grade. I competed in the 2 mile event, and I placed first once and had 3 second place finishes. Then I did a bit of running in the Navy, but it wasn't until 1997 when I did a 5K, and that sort of kicked off consistency in running. But it actually wasn't until later that same year that I ran the Duke Children's 15K and placed third in my age group, and that really permanently sealed the deal on my passion for endurance running.
Nice. And so where did the ultra running come in?
So after the 15K, I ran a few races, and then I did my first marathon in 1999, the Myrtle Beach Marathon, which was a lot of fun. And then I did a couple more marathons and decided I wanted to do more, but I wasn't sure what. And then I found out about ultra marathons, a whole different sort of subculture of running that I didn't even know existed. And I chose for my first ultra the JFK 50 mile in 2001. And it was such an incredible experience running over that type of terrain and being in that type of environment that I knew I was home. Like marathons are fun, other distances are fun, but nothing just, spoke to my soul the same way that ultra marathons have.
Had you always been into the photography side of things, or did that come about as a result of the ultra running as you were out in these awesome places? Like how and where does the photography piece fit in?
So ever since I was a child, I've had an interest in photography, but of course I grew up during the film age, and coming up at it, we didn't have a lot of money when I was coming up. And so you just couldn't take a lot of shots on mom's camera when I was a kid. So the interest was always there,
right?
But the resources were not. But then as cell phones came along and cameras came on cell phones and the cameras on the cell phones became better, I started snapping images with my cell phone pretty consistently, I guess, in 2017. And to my surprise, people were requesting to purchase prints that I would post. And I'm like, I just snapped this with my phone, right? And they were like, well, we don't care. It's a great image. And so that's what started it. I did get my first, real camera in 2018 and have accumulated additional gear since then. So I do have a couple of smaller cameras that I normally take with me on runs and hikes so that the weight isn't as much of a factor. I did carry it some during Swammie, but I eventually ditched the camera because I found that I really didn't have a lot of interest in fooling with the camera while I was running. But I did. So all of those shots were taken with my phone.
I mean, truly, you probably wouldn't know unless you had asked. There's some really good shots out there. Do you go looking for shots specifically, or do you just find and see them and go, oh, that's something I've got to take a shot of?
I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but there's this thing when people say you've got the eye, and I realized I've got the eye. So it's like, I'll come along a scene and it's like, boom, all of a sudden everything in the scene aligns. And I'm like, okay, I need to snap this sort of a thing. And so that's where a lot of my images came in Swammie. So yeah.
Yeah, there's some really good ones out there. Definitely encourage folks to go have a look at. I think you're on mainly Instagram. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's correct. Yeah. Thank you.
So we'll link that. We'll link that in the show notes here, and definitely folks go out there and have a look at that. Now, as far as the FSHD, have you always had that, or where in your running journey did that kick in? If you haven't always had that.
Yeah, sure. So it's genetic. So technically I've always had it, but it didn't manifest itself until later in my life.
Okay.
It is sometimes hereditary, but in my case, it was not. So my genes mutated. So no one passed it down to me, but I can pass it down to my kids. I'm not sure if they have it or not, but it can be passed down. Mine was adult onset. So except for some subtle signs I may have realized going back some years, it really didn't show up until I was 37, 38 years old in 2011, I think it was. And I remember we were moving one weekend and I was trying to reach some shelves in the closet, and all of a sudden my right arm wouldn't go above my shoulder anymore. It didn't hurt. There was no pain associated with it, but I just noticed that I couldn't do what I used to be able to do with that arm. And so eventually I went to the doctor. They referred me to a bunch of people who didn't know what was going on. And finally I got referred to Duke, and they did some tests and discovered that I did have the gene defect that causes the FSHD.
So yeah, for those out there that may be wondering, I think you alluded to it right there, but how does it impact your day-to-day life? And then secondly, how did that then impact your approach to the running and any other endurance sports that you might have participated in after you've had this onset?
Yeah, so the good news is I don't like to make the situation sound worse than it is, because there are a lot of people that I've seen with FSHD that are wheelchair bound. It's progressed much farther with them. There's just huge variations between symptoms and effects that people have. And so adult onset is normally less severe. So thankfully mine is less severe. It is not so far it has not really been a debilitating disease for me. I can still do 85% of the things I've always done, but the disease does progress very slowly, but it does progress. And so things that I've always done are just more difficult for me to do and take, more recovery time sometimes. Also, the FSHD doesn't affect every muscle everywhere. It only affects certain muscle groups. So different types of muscular dystrophy affects different muscle groups. So for me, mine is primarily in my upper back, my triceps, my quadriceps, and my hips, those areas. Also, it's normally asymmetric. So it will usually affect only one side and not the other. Or if it affects both sides, usually one side is affected worse than the other side.
So clearly your FSHD hasn't affected you to the point yet where you can't finish something like the Swammie Shuffle. So let's get into your race experience. What, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was now? I don't know. The days seem to go together.
We finished 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, it's almost exactly 2 weeks ago at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, I had a quick look on your ultra sign up bio, and you have a ton of ultra races out there, but I didn't see any other races kind of up and around the 200-mile mark. What made you decide to tackle the Swammie Shuffle and a 200-miler?
So I have paced my buddy Stephen Dents, at the Swammie twice now, in 2022 and 2024. And during those years, he was always pushing and prodding me to do the Swammie also. And I told him that other than short distances, I really loathed out and backs. And I told him I just couldn't fathom doing an out and back that totaled 216 miles. That's just out of the question.
Yeah.
But through pacing him and crewing him, and also I've done a number of other solo adventures and races on the Outer Banks, I've kind of just become an expert on the course, I guess. And so it started to feel less like something I wouldn't want to do and more like something I'm kind of already doing anyway. So like, why not just sign up and see what happens? And so Vince and I switched roles, and he crewed me. The rest is history.
Yeah, walk us through your experience. First of all, I think you and I met in the runner house pre-race. We were doing some pre-game in the house there. So had you ever done 200 miles in any way, shape, or form at that point, or no?
No, I have done a couple of 100-milers, but I have not finished a 100-miler officially since 2014. Okay, so to more than double that distance, 11 years later was definitely a significant undertaking for me.
How were you feeling that day before, the night before a 200-mile race, having not finished 100 since goodness knows when? I imagine that's got to be pretty daunting.
Yeah, I mean, you know how the runner's mind works because you're one yourself. We go through periods of excitement and dreaming to periods of what the heck have I gotten myself into? And so sometimes it seemed like a really great idea, and sometimes it seemed like a really terrible idea. And this is all before the race even started. So.
And then we had snow this year as well. Snow on the beach and ice on the trails, which is, I guess, unusual for the area. And so added interest to the 200-mile event, although thankfully it went away, I think, as we got further south. But it was pretty cool to start with.
Yeah, it was.
All right, so tell me how your race went. How did it start off? Day 1, day 2, you've got the beach section to get kicked off. How did your race go at the start?
So the good news is I knew all about the beach section because I'd done it twice already, but finishing with Dent. So I knew what to expect. The beach section seemed really easy to me only because the first 2 times I did it was at Dent's finish. And by the way, I had paced, I think the second time I crewed and paced for him, I covered like 80 some miles myself that week. So, I think I was as happy to finish that as he was, even though he had done far more distance than me. So I was kind of thinking about all of that when I was hitting the beach in my own race, but now heading out And obviously, the first day for most everybody is probably the best day, at least for a while. And so I was feeling really good. I thought it would take me 8 hours to get off the beach, because when I did it a year ago with Dents, it took me 8 hours to get off the beach, but I actually came off the beach in 6:48, which was a lot better than I thought I would be. And,
Nice.
yeah. Oh, and I should interject this too is I actually had a really nasty fall on February the 3rd. And for a couple of weeks, I wasn't even sure I would be able to run the race at all, because I was in significant pain in my back. X-rays were negative, which was great, but I still had some pain in my back all the way up till the Friday before the race. But then on Saturday, when we were traveling in, what was lingering had disappeared. And so I was very thankful for that, because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to race at all. And once I got started, I thought the injury might resurface and wreak havoc on my efforts, but it actually didn't. So
Excellent. Yeah, yeah. So you got off the beach in 6:48, which I think is a pretty decent effort, to be fair. And then you start your way down from Corolla down to Nag's Head and then over Pea Island. How was that for you? Did you make good time on those first few days with Mr. Dents? How did you guys work together? How was he setting up from a crew perspective?
yeah. So Dents is so awesome. Like I feel like I did a really good job crewing and pacing him, but I also feel like he was even better than I was. Like I kept telling him, I'm like, man, I said, I feel really needy. I said, I don't know. I feel like I'm tougher for you than you were for me. And maybe that was just me being in my head. I don't know, but he and I strategized constantly. I mean, from the outset, we were constantly strategizing, shifting the game plan. I mean, you know how it is. You were out there. I'm sure you guys were doing the same thing. And so, the challenge is not just maintaining a certain mileage per day, but also how does that coincide with places you would like to stop and stay for the night? And so,
Yeah.
those two things together presented a lot of challenges in the planning for sure.
Did you guys have a plan to stay somewhere every night, or was there ever a plan to kind of go through as far as you can? And did it play out like that?
Here's the funny thing. Okay. So Dents is a more gifted runner than I am. So he can control his plan better by speeding up or slowing down than I can. For me, I'm just going to be slower. Okay. So me improving my situation by speeding up is never going to happen. I just do what I do, and other things have to fall in place in order to make that happen. So when Dents did it, he coined his experience with Swammie as bougie, the bougie Swammie. In other words, he knew where he was going to stay every night. For the most part, he got to all of those places. We stayed, got up the next morning, and continued on. We both knew that my situation was going to be different, because in order for me to log the same amount of miles per day, I was going to need more hours each day to be able to accomplish that same amount of mileage. So we knew that we would probably stay some places along the way, but we didn't have a preset schedule. So we were just kind of seeing how the days went. And then maybe once we got over the halfway point, sort of the finishing plan started to come into more focus, and we kind of knew how much we needed to do and the destinations that we needed to shoot for each day.
Now, I think you said you've done at least some of this course with Steve in particular, but other parts of it maybe by yourself. Are there any favorite parts of this course that you have, or parts that you like the least?
So I really love running through the town of Duck. It's just such a charming little beach town. So I really enjoy Duck. Personally, I prefer running through all of the little towns more than I do the section. I call the sections desolation, the desolation stretches. And it isn't because they aren't beautiful. They are extremely beautiful. And if I were out on a short casual run, I would probably enjoy those sections more. But because I'm already so mentally fatigued, it just seems like some of those sections carry on forever and ever. And so I don't enjoy running ultras in those long desolate sections as much as I do running through the little towns.
Yeah, so down over P Island and then down past, well, out to Avon. That's another one that really messes with people's head. When you come out of Salvo and you've got like 15 miles of straight road until you get to Avon down there. That's a tough stretch.
Yeah, and at one point you can see it in some of the photos I posted, maybe one or two, but I had a bucket hat on, try to keep some of the sun off my face. But man, those vehicles were flying so fast, it was kept blowing my hat off. So then I flipped it up and made it kind of look like a Gilligan's hat, and it was a weird way to wear it, but that was the only way I could keep it on my head.
Yeah. Well, talking of photos, I think you've a great photo out there of you sitting there with, it's the pizza and lube photo, I think, that I like a lot.
Oh.
What was going on with the pizza and lube photo?
Man, I don't know. I like to think that I'm self-sufficient, and I've proven that I can be on my solo adventures. In fact, this is the first race I've ever been crewed in at all, to the best of my knowledge. And so, in a sense, it sort of made me uncomfortable just because I don't know that I really like to be weighted on hand and foot. But it was clear to me that this was going to be my best chance at finishing. I did it for Dance. He was doing it for me. We have such good chemistry together. So it was just a really fun time. And so by the time that photo was taken, like, we knew what our routine was. In fact, I would start texting him in advance of me getting to the next stop saying, I need this, this, and this. And he said that really helped him out a whole lot. And so then when I showed up, he'd have my chair out, all of the things next to it that I would need. And, so, we were kind of a well-oiled machine by that point. So it was funny to get a photo image of what had become our racer crewer reality up to that point.
Yeah, well-oiled or well-lubed, I don't know, but it was definitely good. Now, did you have a standard where Steve would go every 2 miles and stop, or every 5 miles and stop?
Yeah, it was it just sort of depended on where I was mentally and physically. And then, so, we would tweak that. So the overnights or the early mornings, I should say, those are my best times of day. And so I feel like I didn't need as much attention during those times of day. But then the later we got in the day, the late afternoon into early evening is just always really tough for me. And so at times I would say, let's do every 2 miles. And then a time or two, I even called him and had him come meet me even sooner than we had planned, just because times I just felt unwell and things like that. And so yeah, we just kind of tweaked it as we went.
Excellent. Aside from the pizza and lube, were there any other specific moments you can recall, either on the way out or the way back, that really stood out to you? Was there any point in the race where you thought, I may not actually finish this?
Yes, definitely. So I have learned during my multi-day hikes that day 2 is usually the worst for me. So I anticipated day 2 being the worst for me during Swammie, but day 2 was worse than day 1 for sure, but it was actually day 3 when I bottomed out. And so what I was really struggling with is, like, the first 2 nights, I think the first day I logged 44 miles, the next day I logged 40 miles. But each time I wasn't getting to the hotel or wherever we were staying until like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I told Jens, I said, I'm like, man, I can't keep doing this, because here's the thing. I run 117 ultras up to this point over a number of years. And where this differs from other ultras is when you run an ultra, you run for a few hours or a day, and then you get to go home and soothe what ails you, okay? Yeah. But in this, you don't get to soothe anything. You got to get up the next day and do it again, and then the next day and do it again, and then the next day and do it again. So even though in my head I knew that that was what was going to occur, nothing could have prepared me for that experience except to actually become involved in the event. And so when I got up on day 3, I mean, I laid in bed sobbing because I didn't know how I would go on. I was chafing in really, really bad places. You know, my feet were really swollen. My legs just hurt and ached. I mean, I looked like a cripple just getting out of bed and walking around the place. And I really thought I just might not be able to do this anymore. And that's so unlike me because usually I can find some place of motivation to get out the door, but I didn't have any on this day. And so when I tell you, when I finally stepped out the door, I don't even know what made that possible. And I told Vince, I said, I have no goals today. Like my only goal is to take the next step and then the next step, and we'll just see where that gets me. I ended up logging 25 miles that day, which I felt was pretty good considering I didn't want to do 25 feet. But I realized then why these journey races are so incredibly difficult. And it really broke me down, man. It really moved me to the core, you know, experiencing that level of endurance to the point where I just didn't want to go anymore. I mean, really, truly didn't want to go anymore, but did anyway.
Yeah, and yet you did anyway. And that is, I think, is key and point of a lot of these races is that you and others are somehow finding the will to move forwards, which I think is absolutely incredible. Where were you at on day 3? Were you down at the KOA? Were you somewhere in that area, down in Salvo or Rodanthe, wherever that is?
Yes. So when I got to the halfway point, which was Hatteras Light, and then we stayed in Buxton that night, which is about another mile and a half up. I can't even remember the name of the hotel. But and actually, that night I got the best sleep of the entire event. I got seven hours of sleep, and actually Dave Moore was very kind, and he gifted us the room because he had been in there for several hours that afternoon into the evening, and he contacted Dents and said, "Hey, I'm here for a few hours. You know, you guys helped me with a place last night, so I'm going to help you with this place tonight if you want to come stay." And I really feel like that was God setting the whole thing up because, you know, we didn't have a plan of where we were going to stay that night. And so, you know, thanks to Dave, it just literally fell into our lap. And so we showed up around 9:00 that night. He was leaving at about midnight that night. So, you know, we had a quick chat before I went to bed. And so I slept 7 hours and I almost felt like a new man for a little while, but I felt like I felt like a new man the next morning. And, you know, my spirit was really rejuvenated once I headed into day 4.
Yeah, I wanted to ask because a lot of times, and we just did an episode on like how a bunch of us kind of group together, and that whole interaction with other runners is something that can help you push forward for sure. Did you have, aside from Steve, I guess, who's following you around, it sounds like you met with Dave down in Buxton, and that interaction was a pretty good one for you. Did you have interaction with other runners along the way, or did you find yourself kind of running by yourself?
Nick was sort of unofficially with us for a long time. So I remember him from the house, and we ended up first crossing paths, I guess, just before we entered Cape Hatteras National Seashore on day 2, I think. And so, yeah, Dent sort of, you know, took both of us under his wings, really. And, you know, he was primarily crewing me, so obviously I took priority, but he was able to provide Nick with a lot of help too, off and on. And so really from the time we picked Nick up, you know, we were together off and on for most of the event up until the night before the finish.
Yeah, so you guys came up to, where were you based the night before? Did you stop at the Hampton Inn before you hit the beach section?
Yes, that's correct. Hampton Inn in Kerala. So we had about 32 miles to go from that point.
So how had your return journey been from the lighthouse up to that point?
Nothing was as bad as day 3. Day 3 was when I bottomed out. But there were still some challenges. In fact, I would say I think we covered so much distance. I think it was the night of day 4, or was it day 5? I can't remember now. But anyway, when I stayed at the Hamptons, I started in Pea Island that morning at about 3 in the morning, made it all the way to the Hampton Inn in Corolla. So that was a 43-mile day. It was my second longest day. Yeah. And my spirits were so good for 90% of that day. In fact, mentally and emotionally, I felt like I was reveling in the potential success of the event in a way that I thought I would do on the last day, but I didn't on the last day. I really had my best mental and emotional moments on the day before, except for the last few miles, because by that point, I'm tired again, I'm getting ill again. And then it rained. I was hoping to be in the hotel before it rained, and I didn't make it. And so I was rained on for about 3 miles. It doesn't sound terrible. We run in the rain all the time, right? But for some reason, when you're 100 and some miles into a journey run, it just feels like so much more. And, you can't see anything. The cars are coming around. And when I came into the hotel room, I said, Vince, man, I apologize I said, I'm just not in a good headspace. I said, but he said, I was totally fine. Like, he understands, I'm not going to be, chipper all the time, but he said I was fine. I was okay. But clearly I wasn't in the best of, in the best of moods when I came in that night. I'm like, oh my goodness, can this thing be over with already?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know from last year, getting rained on during this event is the worst thing. But hopefully you got a chance to at least dry your stuff out or change gear at the hotel.
I did. So, I'm whining a lot. I'm making it sound a lot worse than it probably was. But, in that moment, it felt like everything. Yeah. Like, it felt like I was never, ever, 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 ever going to get to that hotel. You know how it is.
It does seem like a long way away. Yes, it isn't, but it seems that way.
It does. It did seem that way. But yeah, so I did make it to the hotel, got there by about 10 o'clock, I think, maybe 9:30, something like that. And then Dents and I strategized again and set up a plan for me to be able to finish by the next night.
So you must have been at the hotel the same time that we were all at the hotel, I guess.
I think you guys were there. You guys got there a few hours before we did. I can't remember. I don't know when you left, but maybe there was some overlap. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we left about 12:30. Not to gloat or anything, but we were waiting for the rain to finish before we left, and rather than have to run through it. I don't think anybody in the group I was with really wanted to run through the rain. So we made a decision to just hole out in the Hampton Inn and hit the jacuzzi while the rain came through, and then we would go after that.
But didn't Dave Moore and I can't think of the other lady's name, didn't they go in the rain?
Yeah, Dave and Kim Drake. Yeah, they went through the rain, and we saw them on the beach later on. Well, that's not true. We saw Kim on the beach later on. We caught up to her closer to the finish line, but Dave was already done. But yeah, kudos to Dave. Well, shout out to Dave for sharing his hotel room. I think that's a classic journey run tactic. That definitely shows his experience in journey runs. That is something that happens quite a bit, I understand, in other journey runs along the way, sharing of hotel rooms. So good on you, Dave.
Oh, and a little backstory to Dave Moore is, it's funny, man, because when he came to the house the night before the race, we were introduced to each other, but we didn't recognize each other. And then the next morning, I think it was before the race, or maybe that same night, I can't remember, but he starts telling this story to the whole group of us about how the year before, some guy who he didn't know came up to him and gave him a bacon sandwich, and it just lifted his spirits and changed his day. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm the guy. I'm the one who gave you the bacon sandwich. And he's like, yes, it is you. And so we had actually formed a bond the year before, but then we didn't recognize each other this year until he shared the story. And so we kind of already knew each other. So it was really cool for us to sort of, continue that friendship into this year.
Fantastic. I love that. And I love that about the race as well. It's a very social race. Lots of people interacting and coming back for second years, whether that's as a runner or whether that's as a crew.
Right.
In your case, both. And in
Both.
Steve Dent's case, both. Steve Dent's, if I can even say that appropriately, case, both. So, yeah, I think that's just terrific. So when did you set out from the Hampton Inn, and how was your beach run on the way back? How long did that take you?
We calculated everything out, and I wanted to hit the beach by 9 o'clock because I felt like that would give me enough time to get to the refuge before sunset. So we decided to get up at 4 a.m., roll out by 5 a.m. So from 5 to, and so everything went according to plan. I did those 10 miles to the beach in about 4 hours, had my last crew stop with Dents, and then I hit the beach. The thing is as I alluded to before, I thought the final day would be like sort of a victory lap mentality. Like I would just be relishing in the upcoming victory and everything would feel great. And actually I was just not really, I mean, it wasn't my lowest point during the race. Definitely wasn't my greatest point. I wish I had enjoyed the last 32 miles more than I did. And so it just felt like, here we go again. And, but Dents is something else. At first, Dents was going to meet me at the finish. But my corner had said through Dents, he said, tell David I'm going to come to the state line gate and meet him, and I'm going to run in with him. So that was the plan. Well, when Dents and I had our last crew stop before I went onto the beach, sorry, Dents, I got to do this to you, but he got really emotional talking with me, and he's like, man, there's no way I'm going to let you run that beach section alone, dude. He's like, we've been in this together. He said, I'm coming onto the beach with my corner and we're going to run it in with you together. And so
awesome.
I don't know who else has been able to experience that in the history of the event, and they didn't quite make it to the gate by the time I got there, but I knew they were on their way. So after I came through the gate, I'm in Virginia. You don't trust most of what you think you see when you're on that long, desolate stretch of sand. And so I literally had to stare at these silhouettes for a good 20 minutes before I trusted what I was seeing. But eventually the silhouettes got bigger. Eventually they gained color. Eventually they gained voices. And I'm like, oh my God, they're really here.
Yeah.
And so Dents swiftly took the pack from my back, took my trekking poles. Man, I don't know where I would have been in my head without those two, the last, 10, 11 miles, because I mean, I didn't have a choice but to finish. By the time you're there, you know how it is. You're invested at that point, but
there's no way back.
There's no way back. But mentally, emotionally, I just think it would have been way worse for me to have not had them there. So I just can't even express to them my gratitude enough for doing that for me.
Well, huge shout out to Steve Dents and Mike Horner for going out. There was a group of us at the finish line at the time, and we actually watched them get ready and leave to go meet you at the state line. And I know from experience just how desolate and lonely that beach section can be, especially when you've been on it for hours and hours and you pass the state line and you think, well, I've still got more to go here.
It's terrible because you're chasing a horizon that you can never achieve.
It just never stops. It just goes on forever and ever. And you're like, this has got to end at some point, surely.
Right. And then Virginia Beach shows up on the horizon and you think for a second, okay, this is evidence I'm making progress. But then Virginia Beach taunts you. And it's like, shouldn't I be there already? I can see Virginia Beach, and you just still can't seem to get there.
Yeah. You can just make out the silhouette outline of some buildings, and you think, "Oh, I'm nearly there. I must be close." And then it takes forever to get to those. You're right. It taunts you the whole way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're looking for that Back Bay brown sign, because then know you're in, and you're like, "Where is this sign? It must be here somewhere." And it never seems to arrive until it does. But it's a long that last section there is really long.
It is. It's brutal.
Yeah, just mentally a challenge. So brilliant to have those two guys come out. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that. And that would be something to ask James and Josh, whether anyone's had their crew run out to meet someone and run back with them.
Well, I did run with Dents for the entire beach section at the end in 22
Oh,
and
okay.
24.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes, Dents did have company the 2 years that he did it, but I don't know that anybody's run in from the other side and then run back. That might be new to the
Yeah.
event. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess people have had pacers coming over the beach section before, but I wonder if anyone's actually gone out and come back. Well, and you finished. So how was it crossing the finish line? Was it everything you had imagined, or what?
It was way more than I imagined. So one of the things I really wanted to do was finish in the daylight. I just felt like it would be easier mentally and emotionally. You kind of feel like you're still with the world if you don't finish in the middle of the night. And
Hmm.
so, that was one thing I was really excited to be able to do was finish in the daylight. However, I couldn't have anticipated the type of reception that I would get. I knew I was going to be one of the last runners. I knew a lot of the earlier runners would already be gone. So other than Dents and the race staff, I kind of wasn't expecting anybody else to be there. But you and the party pack were still there and just happened to be having dinner at the place where the finish line was. And so the way things just worked out time wise was just absolutely perfect. Like I couldn't have set it up any better if I had tried to orchestrate all of that. So it was just so wonderful to, walk into all of the cheers and finishers like yourself and the others in your group. And then, the race staff. And of course, Dents earned the first hug when I came in because he's the one that got me through. It was like, golly, man, like I just wouldn't even accept success until I was probably in that last half mile,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, it just felt like a huge weight was being, lifted off. Like finally I can accept that this is going to become a reality and I don't have any more distance left to face, and that was just a huge relief for me. Total jubilation for sure.
Absolutely. And that last probably mile or so road section, that seems pretty long too. When you turn on the road, you're like, oh, I'm nearly done. I'm off the blue track and I'm on a road.
It does. And the good news is, like I said, I've done it with Dents before. So I remembered from those 2 years, when you get off the beach, you're still not done. So thankfully, I already had that mental reference. And, they kept saying, oh, remember, we get off, still got 2 miles. And I'm thinking to myself, I know, but it's not the beach. So this is still great.
Right. It's not that damn sand.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I love that you finished, and we were all there. We loved your finish too. I'm sure there's a video of it somewhere on the Awareness and Action site. There's usually a video of your finish that folks can go check out. I'm curious though, along the way, you took some really cool photos. You're looking back now that you've kind of had a minute. Was there any particular section or parts of the race where you think, oh, I got some really, really cool photos? What was your favorite photo that you took from the race?
Well, as much as I dislike ultra running through the sections of desolation, those are some of the most photogenic sections. So I love to take snapshots of that big open road to nothingness. I just think it's so poetic. I would have loved to have gotten some dune shots at Pea Island, but I didn't travel through there during the daytime in either direction. However, the stars there through that section were phenomenal. There was almost no light pollution, and so it really allowed the stars to pop out. However, I think the most memorable photogenic section was start of day 4 when I was leaving Buxton and the Pamlico
Okay.
Sound is there to the left. I rarely create extra distance voluntarily, but I decided to create about 30 or 40 yards of extra distance to walk down to the sound side there because the scene was otherworldly. And so the photographer and me, couldn't pass that up, not even during an event like this. And so and that was the only time during the event I wish I'd kept my real camera on me because iPhones are great, but I don't think they translate colors the best sometimes. And I did the best I could in editing to try to duplicate what I felt like I saw with my eye, but I just feel like in person it was just way more beautiful. The colors were not what you typically see. There were purples and pinks. And anyway, it was just a good time to sort of stand still for a few seconds and sort of breathe in the scenery. So that was a really beautiful section to me.
Yeah, I love that mindset. The sunrises and sunsets out there, generally speaking, are pretty epic. And I love the fact that you just take a moment to sit and watch. And I think a number of us in the group I was with, especially on that last day on the beach when we saw the sunrise, since we'd been going through the night, is just epic. Do you feel like the ultra running and the photography, that sort of calming aspect, does that help you cope better or manage with the challenges that FSHD brings?
Maybe. I kind of joke and say that I'm always at war with my camera during ultras because it's always calling to me from wherever I have it stashed, but I often resist because I'm kind of like in race mode or ultra mode, and I just don't like to fool with anything that takes me out of my rhythm. And so sometimes I don't feel like taking the camera out, and I don't feel like, taking the shot. But I also realize, for me, that's part of the journey and that's part of the adventure. And so if for nothing else, it's good self-documentation for me to just pause for a few seconds to get that shot that I'll never have a chance to get again. So
do you feel like that's a good mental reset for you? Just like following that creative outlet in the midst of something so difficult, I guess, as a 200-mile journey run?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like photography, while running, while adventuring, while hiking, I feel like photography for me, is synonymous with those events. And so it's part of what I like to do when I'm out there. And so, it comes very naturally for me to do that sort of a thing.
Yeah, I'm very much an amateur in that field, but for most of us anyway, it's a great pictorial reference and representation of what we did. You've got some really cool images out there of just incredible, peaceful scenes. A lot of your stuff seems very peaceful. I don't know if you would classify it as that, but you've got these beautiful beach pictures and the stars it's all very sort of calming. And I wonder if that's by design or by accident. But either way, that's how it comes across.
I think my attraction to landscape photography is probably a reflection of my introversion. And so I feel at peace when I'm in the bush or I'm in the wilderness or I'm in, a large open space. And so, I just get really inspired to take photographs that don't involve a lot of activity, places where people see them and think, wow, I can breathe in this place, or I can think in this place, or I can reflect in this place, because that's how I feel when I'm in those places. And so I try to take photographs that might make other people feel the same way.
And I think you're succeeding, whereas my pictures are like selfie of me on a bench during the same race. So
I got plenty of absurd selfies too. So don't let me fool you into thinking everything I take is a pro shot, because it's not.
You're definitely a level up from me, that's for sure. But I can appreciate where you're coming from, and I aspire to take some photos like that one of these days if I can figure out how to use my phone properly. So when you take your phone in place of your actual camera, are you like really techie with the phone? Do you adjust all the settings and the aperture and all that kind of stuff, or do you just take a picture and move on like the rest of us?
So I have an iPhone 15, so that's what I use, 15 Pro. What I've learned about iPhones over the years is they have strengths and weaknesses, and so I've learned the types of lighting and times of day and scenes that are going to return decent shots versus one that aren't. One of the great shortcomings of iPhones is they are terrible in sunlight. And so they just blow everything out. You're never going to get a starburst from the sun, at least not a very good one, I don't think. And so those types of shots are off the table. But if you have settings where maybe, obviously what they call golden hour, early in the morning or later in the evening, those are always good times to shoot. Cloudy days, you can do phenomenal things with an iPhone on cloudy days or overcast days or sort of milky skies. Yeah, you can do really, really good things with the iPhone. And they do have some settings, so you can tweak the lighting some. I may not do that as much as I would with a regular camera. But, once you learn the strengths and weaknesses of an iPhone and those star shots too, you're still not going to pick up as many stars as you would with a camera and a lens. But if you hold it super still for a few seconds, you can still capture quite a few stars, even with the iPhone too. They're really good at collecting light. So yeah, everybody could do it if, they aspire to, for sure.
Well, folks, if you want to learn about how to get better photos with your iPhone while you're doing your event, definitely go check out David. He's got some great shots out there, and there might be some inspiration for you using your iPhone like I do. I'm definitely going to try to get better photos when I go do this stuff. See where I can get. So, David, what's next for you? Where do you go from here? Having done a 200-mile journey run, what on earth do you do after that?
Are you ready for this?
Yes, go. What do you got?
8 days from now, I'm going right back to the Outer Banks for 100 miles along the same course we just did 2 weeks ago.
You're doing is it Blackbeard?
Yeah, Blackbeard's Revenge 100, yeah.
And that's incredible. I can't believe you're going back to do more on the same course, which is wild. That one, I think, starts in Corolla, does it not?
Yes. It starts at Corolla Light and goes all the way down to the museum. So it still goes to Hatteras Light and then back out that road like Swammie does, but then you take a left instead of a right and continue down for about another 13 miles to the museum, and that's where the finish is.
Oh, it's one way at least.
Yeah, it is. It's one way. Yeah.
Wow. Well, good luck to you on that. At least you'll be familiar with the route.
I will be familiar with the route. It's funny because I actually Googled how long does it take to recover from a 200-mile run. Seems like AI has an answer for everything, and I was shocked that they had an answer for that.
Really?
And they're like, could take this long for this long for that, but expect it to take, several weeks. And I'm like, great, I'm going to be running a 100 while I'm recovering from a 200. This doesn't sound like a good idea.
Call it a long recovery run.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens. I've attempted Blackbeard 3 times before. I DNF'd all 3 times because I was either at cutoff or was in danger of missing cutoffs to the point that I didn't see that it made any sense to continue on. So, I'm going to give it another go. I know that with FSHD, the clock is kind of ticking, maybe. And so I get a little slower every year. And so I think, I still am healthy enough to be able to attempt it. So let's give it another go and see what happens. And I may finish and I may not, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway.
Well, best of luck on that. Where do they have the aid stations, if any, or is it more journey style again?
No, it's definitely not journey style. So they have at least basic aid stations like water and Gatorade every few miles. And then they have bigger aid stations like every 18 or 20 miles or so. And also at those bigger aid stations, you can have drop bags. So a lot of people have crew. I've never had crew out there. I don't think you really need it because you have the aid stations and you can do your drop bags. And if you plan them out well, you should have everything you need during the course. So brilliant. Yeah, so it's planned out pretty well. I'm hoping that for a 100-miler, the clock is generous. It's 32 hours. So that's about a 1920 or 1930 mile. I'm hoping that covering all of the same terrain again will feel mentally so easy because I just did it, but it took me 5 days to do it instead of 32 hours. And so even though the physical challenge is more condensed and maybe in that sense more challenging during those 32 hours, I'm hoping that mentally it will feel better and maybe that'll be enough to push me through. I don't know.
Well, best of luck to you out at Blackbeard's. My good friend Peter Y is also running Blackbeard this go around. So, and he did Swammie last year, I think. So,
okay.
Look out for Pete.
Okay.
You can't miss Pete. He's a great guy. But good luck to you running Blackbeard. Now, one of the things we do here, David, with every guest that comes on the show is encourage you to pick or add a song to the free Choose to Endure Spotify playlist. Usually it's something to lift you up, motivate, or kind of keep you moving while you're out on the trail. Do you want to tell folks which song you picked, if you can remember, and why that song kind of resonates with you?
Yes, I remember. So actually, when we were in the race house, I was wearing a Striper beanie. Striper is a band, a Christian heavy metal band that was formed in the 80s. They are still writing and performing music today. And so that band has always resonated deeply with me because during the turbulent teen years, you know, the message in the music and the style of the music really ministered to me. And back then, my extreme sport was skateboarding, and so I associated their music a lot with skateboarding. Now I associate their music with running. Actually, I saw them play at small venues in recent years, 2016 and 2022. And in 2022, I was given permission to actually photograph the band during the first three songs of the set.
How cool.
Yeah, so I got a lot of really great candid shots of the band. So anyway, that the song that I chose is the first Striper song that I ever heard, and still is my favorite Striper song, which is Soldiers Under Command. And so even if the lyrics and the message don't necessarily resonate with people, maybe the music itself will. And that's kind of what put them on the map was, you know, their hard, edgy style of metal. It's very 80s, okay, but yeah. It's hard not to get a little motivated when you hear it, at least not for me anyway. And so maybe other people will feel the same way.
Oh yeah, I'm a big 80s fan. I love some 80s rock. I love the glam rock and the hard rock and all that stuff. So I loved this tune. I thought it was terrific, and it will make a nice addition to the playlist. It's fast, you know, it doesn't stop. It keeps going at you. It's definitely got that uplifting beat. So from a running perspective, I would imagine it's pretty cool to listen to while you're running too. So I'm going to chuck it on there, and we'll get that added so that other people can enjoy it just as much as you do, David. As we look to wrap up the conversation, I definitely want to thank you again for joining the show and sharing your story. I think, if anything, it's definitely a really good reminder that the human spirit is stronger than any obstacle out there, whether through miles on the trails or moments behind the camera. David's journey, I think, reflects the beauty of perseverance, self-expression, and finding joy along the way. I hope you enjoyed this episode, listeners, as much as I did. And if you want to follow David's photography journey, you can find his work at Beloved Peace Photography on Instagram, which is awesome. Perfect. And if you're out there browsing the internet looking for that, and I highly suggest you do, there are some tremendous photos out there. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this show, and that way you'll get notified each time a new episode drops. If you like what you hear, please follow, share, and leave a review. That would mean the world to me. Your support helps grow the podcast, connects more runners to this amazing ultra community we've got out there, and spreads the word to those who could benefit from what we share right here. You can find this show on Instagram and Facebook at Choose to Endure, or visit anytime at choosetoendure.com. I would love to hear from you guys, whether that's just to say hello, suggest a topic, or share your story or recent successes. That way we can get to it on air. You can also email me directly at info@choosetoendure.com if that's your preference. Interacting with listeners just like you is one of my favorite parts of doing the show, so don't be shy about reaching out. Until next time, make sure you run long, run strong, take some kick-ass photos while you're doing it, and choose to endure.